Well, hello, brothers and sisters in Subuth. I'm Michelle O'Fried. I have been living in Ecuador since 1972. I have three Ecuadorian children. I studied public health nutrition before I came to Ecuador, but after having seen hunger in West Africa, where I lived for a few years before I came to Ecuador. So that started me off. But I guess what really began was maybe those talents that God gave me that have to do with flavors and smells. I'm just passionate about food. So I imagine I studied my profession to justify my own personal passion and talents. So what am I doing in Fuegos? Well, after decades of being in Ecuador and working with different NGOs, many of them women's NGOs, and almost always working with women's groups of people who didn't have a lot of resources. But remember, in Ecuador, since we're on the equator, we can have fresh fruits and vegetables, everything fresh all year round. It was nice to get out of the US, where in that time there was a war, and I certainly hope there will not be another one. There was the war in Vietnam that I was not in agreement with. And there was also all of that food out of cans. So I loved being able to have the opportunity to eat real food, and often to get to know the person who was growing that food, or who had fished, or the person whose eggs I was buying from, or whose chickens I could stew the hens, or as chickens, I could just create anything I wanted, always with products that I could trust. So after working for NGOs, including the United Nations, and just the way God moves things in your life, I found myself in a situation where I could be part of a new NGO that we organized to help deal with the problems after a very bad earthquake in the province that's called Manabi. That earthquake was in 2006. So FUEGOS is an NGO that works from food. It works from food to make social transformation. And since I've always worked in women's groups and with aspects of gender, and since I've always worked also with women's groups and community groups and groups that didn't have many resources in the terms that the first world might think about, but was full of, most of them had some land, most of them could grow something, and they still appreciated the traditions of their grandparents. So it wasn't a society, and still isn't in most of the country, a society that has bought into the new food transition, the transition into eating out of the agro-industrial sector. Here we can eat real food. So in Fuegos, that's what we do. We help through our school youth to be able to learn how to put up their own businesses. Many of them come from families that have food businesses. Those youth are learning how to eat in a very beautiful, healthy, sustainable way, straight from the land that's close to them. Those communities and those students are being able to appreciate their own food and perhaps create it in new, very exciting ways. Because in Fuegos, we talk about the importance of presenting traditional food from Manabi, which is famed for being the best food in Ecuador, and Ecuador has incredible food all over the country. We in Fuegos have almost as our slogan, the new food from Manabi. And it's new because of the innovations that we're doing. Most people in Manabi no longer eat many vegetables and are not used to eating raw salads. Maybe those raw salads would have brought amoebas into their lives. So now that they can grow their own products and that our students are realizing how delicious those products are. One other aspect of that Susila Dharma is helping us with in this new year of work is peace culture, culture of peace. Manavi has had huge amounts of machismo. I don't know if we say that in English. And on top of that, people were born almost with machetes in their belts. So it's a society that has not learned how to come to conflict resolution through dialogue. The first thing that people think of is who's going to fight whom and how strong are they? That, of course, is a problem in our school. It's a problem in the area where it's so prone to earthquakes. So we're very, very thankful for Susila Dharma for giving us the chance to work on the culture of peace there in Manabi. It's a different world from the world most Ecuadorians have even grown up in. When you grow up in the Andes, you have community support to resolve conflicts. I'm not saying that they aren't sometimes resolved violently, but it's been talked about and the whole community has come up with a decision. Where in Manabi, it's a very individualistic and almost solitary way of life. So there is so much that I am learning because when I came to Ecuador, I was living in the middle of the Andes. And the work in Manabi is work in a different world, a world that has so many needs and also so much potential and so much delicious food. One Health is a new concept. Health has always been viewed from the health sector, which is based on the learning of professionals, doctors, nurses, and usually health centers and hospitals. That's a kind of health that does not even fit public health standards. But unfortunately, in almost all of the world, health has been viewed from the health infrastructure rather than viewing it as part of life. So One Health brings together the traditional health sector with much more focus on preventive health, public health focus, along with what people in the development world are considering a whole new aspect, which is sustainability. The food that I eat, how much plastic is involved in it? Am I drinking really safe, beautiful spring water out of a plastic bottle? It has to do with the foods that I'm eating. Are they coming from healthy ecosystems, from regenerative agriculture? And these are all new aspects of health. So in One Health, we link the health sector with everything else about life, particularly the agricultural sector, that hasn't usually combined consumption, which comes from their sector, with health. We are so lucky to have very good relationships with the United Nations, with FAO, as well as with WHO, who are trying to bring about these new models, linking production with consumption. And in Iche, Fuegos, through our food school and our restaurant, we're able to put these things into practice. Our students every day cook their own meals, that they are trained how to have healthy meals using healthy local products. The project that Fuegos wrote for Susila Dharma 22 is a project that our other funders, who are big funders like the Inter-American Foundation or the Italian Ecuadorian Foundation for Sustainable Development, those funders don't fund the kinds of human things that we are so thrilled that Susila Dharma can help us fund. For example, culture of peace. We couldn't find one of those big funders, or if we put it in our project, we would know that we wouldn't get the funding to do that. So to write a project to get a big funder, we had to know the kinds of things they would fund, but to have a project that works well, that follows Bapak's idea of perfecting humankind, we can do it with funding from Susila Dharma. To begin with, food is something that everybody deals with, hopefully at least 3 times a day. We all eat. And 38% of all of greenhouse gases come from the food system. People think it comes from, if we take a car or a bicycle. Part does, but imagine 38% comes from the food system. So the choices we make in our own households can bring about a huge improvement in climate change. Climate change is one of the aspects that we can hope to address in Fuegos by the kinds of choices of the foods that we eat. Our approach to climate change is to have our project located locally, to use local food, and to train people to be able to earn money in their own localities. They're using public transportation, using food locally, and training communities, families, and our own students to eat locally. We are addressing climate change. Remember, I told you about the 38% of the emission of greenhouse gases brought on by the food system. Well, we operate with the food system in a very different way. So we do view that we are helping mitigate climate change through working with food. Also, one thing I didn't mention is that we, for our restaurant and for the food that we consume in teaching and in eating of our students, all of that food is bought locally and hopefully from groups of farmers or groups of fishing people or individual families who raise their own pig or raise a few ducks or raise a few chickens. We're not entering into the huge food system that operates out of either Guayaquil or Quito, where everything is brought to one center and then goes out. We're operating, helping local people be able to sell their products directly. And of course, we can pay a decent price, which when you're going through all those intermediaries, never happens. So that's another way that through food and the way we operate food at our school, we are helping the economies and also helping climate change.